She is the CDO and co-founder of Payr in Norway.
So, sorry, but I can't see my notes, and I really need to have a reference to that. No?
Just bear with us 1 second.
Yeah.
Your map should just be on the screen.
Yeah, but it's not. But it might be the presentation mode.
Are you doing it on?
Yeah. System preferences. This is always fun. Arrangement. No. Do not mirror displays. I think this is it. Let's see. No. Okay. Anyone knows this?
Anybody an expert on getting notes onto a laptop whilst?
Okay, I can bring my physical notes, then I have something. Okay, so this is actually great because my topic today is failure. So I get a good start. Okay, I can use this. That's fine. No. It's on Google Docs.
Okay.
Ignore. Close. Let's start. And the clicker is supposed to work now, right? No, that's my mouse.
So the quicker it should be. Yeah.
Okay, so the last speak. Oh, yeah.
It's already on.
So that's why I have
take
that.
this one
Okay.
out and put that in
Yep.
the side of the.
Okay. Okay. Lord. So, yes. Okay. Okay, so hi, I'm Aste, and I work at Payr. And Aste, that's like Austin Powers, just without the N and the powers. And Payr, that's one of Norway's leading FinTech startups. And today, I'm going to talk to you about my many failures personally and professionally. So let's have a look at the art of failure. I wanted to be an artist. I applied to 3 academies. I received 2 no's. The third one told me I was on a waiting list. I was number 14. In other words, everyone besides 1 had to say no for me to get in. I would never get in. 1 week before the school starts, they called me up and told me I got a spot. When I turned up the first day of school, the teachers were confused because we were 16 people for 15 spots. It turned out a summer assistant had made a mistake, and I was number 16. But no one wanted to send me home at that point. So I got in because of a human failure. I finished my bachelor and I moved to Sweden. I had no money, so I entered the real world again. And 5 years of art education turned out to be absolutely useless in the job market. So I had to go back and doing something I was good at. I became a babysitter. It was the same job I had when I was 11 years old. I tried to make art when I got home from work, but I didn't manage. I was a failed artist. I applied to the Master of Interaction Design at Malmö University, and I got in. We worked in multidisciplinary teams. Sorry, what's going on here? Multidisciplinary teams, from concept to development, and everything we made was tested on real people every step of that process. We had to have user validation to convince our teachers that we had a possible business case. I finished my master and entered a high unemployment market in Malmö without much possibilities of working as an interaction designer. So I started in a job I could get, working in customer service for an online flower store. Once again, I had managed to take an education that did nothing for me in the real world. Now I was holding both a bachelor and a master in unuseful education. Until I applied for a job in Oslo. I got the job, and finally I was an interaction designer for real. I was immediately put to make wireframes based on abstract specifications written for developers before I passed on the work to a graphic designer. This was not what I'd been taught in school. How was I supposed to be doing my job as an interaction designer without knowing the customer perspectives? Despite of lots of good feedback from clients and colleagues, I knew I wasn't doing my work properly. I worked with HR system, lottery, insurance, pension funds, banks, and no one really cared about what their customers said. So I did what had to be done. I went out on the street talking to people, filming their responses, and which I then showed to my clients. And my clients were surprised. Is that what they think of insurance? Do they think it's complicated and we're trying to screw them over? So, through my enlightened clients, I started getting pots of money to make proper user research and testing. I was changing things around, and I was on the top of the world, professionally. Personally, I just was about to hit a series of fiascos, because I fell in love with a colleague of mine. And I decided to tell him. I told him how we loved the same things, how we laughed at the same stuff, how we were always hanging out together, and hey, we're meant to be together. But he wasn't that positive to my perfect plan. He rejected it. And I accepted that for a while. And then I tried again. And he refused me again. I cried my bitter tears. But then again, I was just so convinced that we were belonging together. So I tried again. And he turned me down again. Almost a year after my first attempt to get him to date me, we shared a bottle of Norwegian liquor together. And he told me that he was quitting his job to become the CEO of a company that he had built some years earlier in New Zealand, on the other side of the world. And at the very same time, he finally agreed that we should start test dating. The next day, he quit his job, and overnight, we became madly in love. So 1 month later, I quit my job to go to New Zealand with him. He had a role as the CEO, and I didn't have working permission. Moving to the other side of the world without working permit was a disaster. Meeting the fantastic country of New Zealand with no job and no friends took me directly into a dark depression. And I cried for months. After 5 months, we decided that the plan wasn't working out as planned. And we took a long holiday back in Norway for me to find my ground again. But Back in Norway, we immediately failed again because we failed at using birth control. Now we were facing an unwanted and unexpected pregnancy. After many fights, we doubtfully decided to have the kid. So we would move back to New Zealand with the heavy news of telling his company we were moving back to Norway. And my partner's dream of becoming the CEO failed because of me. Back in Norway, I started in a new design company, but that turned out to be a failure. And then I started in the old communication company, which also turned out to be a mistake. And then I failed at getting a job I really wanted. My partner had just started a new company and wanted me in. But living and working together seemed like a setup for a huge failure. But how do you really know what works and not if you don't test it? So I started working in Payr parallel to my regular job. And after 4 months, I quit my regular job as we had planned for investments and everyone would get a salary. But getting investments was a tough fight. Every week we had numbers of meetings with different investors, everything from angel investors to huge VC funds. And they all had different reasons. We had come too far with our product. We hadn't come far enough. We were asking for too much money, or we weren't asking for enough money. Or they weren't really interested in FinTech. We managed to gather enough money for us to continue developing the product while the team lived on credit cards. And quitting your job before you have funding is only recommended if you're comfortable in the uncomfortable. 5 months of our budget, we were about a month from launching. And we had everything lined up and ready when the unexpected fuck-up started to appear. All of them had the power to stop the launch. First, our partnering bank put an unexpected term on the table. That was impossible for us to follow. This was a deal breaker. Would we have to find a new partnering bank? The company that made our backend suddenly started demanding more money than agreed for us to continue the working together. Our good relationship was suddenly horrible. They stopped working, and we considered working out on the whole solution. We had spent 3,000 hours and 9 months to get our license from the finance authorities. We had one detail left before we would get the final stamp. There were no problems in sight, until it came out that they had not decided if the solution we were using was okay. And they were in the middle of an internal process that had no specific deadline. And our case manager had just left his job for good. In addition to this, the team was starting to get tired and exhausted by not receiving any salary. And I was giving birth to our second kid in 2 months. Would I be able to witness the birth of Payr before I was giving birth myself? The same way the errors appeared from nowhere, they were magically solved. The bank agreed to our terms. The backend company and we managed to find a minimum common ground to work together. And the finance authorities speeded up their process, approved it, and we got the full license. We even managed to get some money into the team so that everyone besides the leaders could get a universal basic income. We launched in June, and I gave birth in July. So we relaxed for a millisecond. The day our baby was 3 weeks old, my husband was out again having meetings with investors 24/7. For us, it's been all or nothing with Payr. We invested all the time we have and all the money we have. And this time, we were 4 days away from losing everything. But we managed to get the money in last minute, and 10 months after we started without any financial security, we received our first salary. I just decided that I wanted to talk about failure at this conference and started listing the failures we'd had in Payr. And I was disappointed. Because where are the real failures, I thought to myself. And then I went to bed. At 2 a.m., my husband wakes me up and says, "We have a horrible issue in the app, and people are writing horrible things on social media." 1 hour later, the bug was fixed. It was a serious security flaw. We started by reporting it to the finance authorities and the data protection agency. Then we sit down with our risk and compliance team to map out the incident. And next, we had to take care of our customers. We had 50 customers that had experienced that bug. So we just started calling them. The first person I called had been saying pretty bad things about us at Facebook, and she was scared and mad. But by the end of that conversation, she was understanding to what happened, and she ended up telling us how well the app was working. She removed her comments on Facebook, replacing them, saying how well we handled this incident. Throughout the day, we ended up getting a lot of good feedback, both on the app and how we handled that bug. So a fuck-up is not what defines you, because people understand a proper fuck-up. But it's how you handle it, and as long as you treat it correctly. But you do have the design failures, and that's the type of failure that might end up killing people. And for this story, I want you all to close your eyes, and I'll let you know when you can open them. And don't worry, I'm just going to tell a story. This was approximately 1 year ago. My husband, our 2-year-old, and I had been traveling in Sri Lanka for 3 weeks. I was 3 months pregnant. We were at our hotel, and I was running around with our 2-year-old when a stranger came up to me and asked, "Are you the wife of that guy by the pool? Because he says he needs his EpiPen." An EpiPen is filled with adrenaline and is given to people with an allergic reaction that can be life-threatening. I immediately took our kid in on my arms, and I ran as fast as I managed to get his suitcase. When we reached my husband, he's on the sunbed, and he looks terrible. His body is full of red blisters. I've seen this before, but in smaller doses, and now it's everywhere. I ramble through the suitcase, and I find the EpiPen. I read the instruction. Take off the safety cap. Make sure to hit it hard on his outside thigh. Outside thigh. It seemed important. I turned the pen where I just took off the safety cap, turning it towards his thigh, getting a glimpse of a reference to Pulp Fiction before I hit it hard on his outside thigh. I look at him, and I'm searching for a reaction. And then I feel pain. I don't understand, but my thumb hurts. And then I see it. I've just hit his only medicine into my own thumb. By this time, there are people working at the hotel surrounding us. I beg them to get a doctor. They need the manager. I beg them to get the manager. And the manager finally shows up and tells us to go to the hospital. By the time the manager managed to find us a minivan, my husband can't move. 4 Sri Lankan guys carry him into the minivan. And we start driving slowly. It's 20 minutes to the nearest hospital, and I try to focus on holding my husband awake. I look at the traffic, and for a glimpse second, I let myself get fully aware of the situation I'm in. I'm 3 months pregnant. We have our 2-year-old. We have borrowed more money than we can return to build our company. And my husband is the CEO and the spine of that company. And if this turns out really, really bad, I have to spend my life designing that EpiPen. I can see, my husband shouts, and he goes blind. And I know that that means that his brain is not getting any oxygen. He never experienced that before. And no one knows how long it takes before he dies in that situation. I'm just holding his hand, and I'm saying we're close, and I'm hoping I'm right. We finally reach the hospital. He's immediately put in a wheelchair, taken to the emergency room, meeting a doctor that gives him a shot of adrenaline. It takes 2 minutes, and he's back to being himself. The doctor keeps an eye on him for an hour, gives him lots of different drugs, and then we go back to the hotel. I put our son to bed. I fix some food for my husband, and then I go into the bathroom and cry. I cry about the failure I'd done and what almost happened. Then you can open your eyes again. Because this failure was close to definitive. And it was all because it lacked intuitive design. I saved that EpiPen because I couldn't understand how I managed to do that mistake. And I'll tell you how. In front, there are 3 instructions. And it's not much. And I'm not always reading everything I should before I start using things. But in this situation, I thought I did. And in my head, I just knew that where I just took off the safety cap was where the precious medicine was. And I was in a stressful situation. I knew it was life or death, and I was eager to get that medicine into him. That EpiPen had all the instructions it needed to have. It was my failure. But humans fail. We panic, we're lazy, we don't care enough, we forget, we misunderstood. You can't trust humans to do what you want them to. The only thing that you can trust humans to do is to screw up. And we should design for that. And I also like to add that on the back of this pen, it says, make sure you don't shoot it onto your own thumb. So I think this has happened before. Okay, so in Payr, I finally work in multidisciplinary teams from concept to development, and everything we make is tested on real people every step of that process. We steer our business through user validation, and we do lots of qualitative and quantitative user tests. We're not married to any of our ideas. We're just testing out things, and we steer wherever we see we create some enthusiasm by our users. We work lean, we do sprints, we do business model canvas, and we make sure to fail in all the correct ways. Fail fast, fail often, and celebrate it too. You heard it all before. Celebrate failure. But when is a really good time to be celebrating that failure? Looking back at the failures I experienced, professionally and privately, most failures are hard to celebrate in the very moment you realized you failed. So I created a list for some of the failures you might experience and a suggestion for when to do the celebration. So, number 1, mini failure. Based on testing, you find out your theories were wrong, and then you do a change. The success we had with Payr is because we do lots and lots of mini failures. We're constantly testing out ideas, sketches, and business models, and removing or changing stuff that don't work. And to create a sustainable business, you want to reduce the risk of failing. And to reduce the risk of failing, that's best handled by failing often. That's kind of weird. This is hardly a failure. This is just a well-performed process, and you can celebrate immediately. And then we have the fuck-up failures. These are the failures where you simply fuck up. When you fuck up, fix it fast, clean up after yourself. And this failure is possible to celebrate when you cleaned up and people forgave you. Then you have the persistent failure. These are the failures where you won't stop trying no matter how stupid it seems. It's the same method at the same place. This failure might not be celebrated for a while, but can be celebrated in the moment you reached whatever you were trying for. And then we have the bigger failures, where you invested time, feelings, money, energy, and education, but where you suddenly, after years, you realize, I can't do this. And then you go and do something else. You will not be celebrating failure at that time, until you have moved on. Years later, when you're doing something else and you can look back, the picture will look quite differently. Because that failure forced you to make a turn. And that turn can make you more successful in something else. So that's a turning failure. That's celebrated in the context of history. And then we have the deadly design failure. This is the only failure you can never celebrate. Never, ever. So, failures, they will play a part in your personal life and in your business. It's an opportunity to experience and learn. But it's how you choose to handle that knowledge and what you do about it that will define you. So, when facing a failure, change something, clean up your mess, or just try again. Cry if needed, celebrate whenever you can, and just try to avoid the failures that might end up killing someone. Because most failures are opportunities, even though they might not need a bit of context of history to show that. So now, go out and fail, and let me know how it goes. Thank you.